happened to me today and I can't believe it and I just wish I had have said this, this, and this, but I didn't because I'm always just too chicken. Hello and welcome back to my channel, Life in Germany. If you haven't been here before, my name is Jenna. I am a Canadian who has been living here in Germany since 2014. And over the course of these years, I've definitely had my fair share of saying things that I shouldn't have said to a German, or perhaps not even saying anything at all, because I find that as a Canadian, we tend to hold back our anger or our frustration, and we don't really speak up and explain or talk about a situation when it's upsetting us. And yesterday was the first day that I actually finally stood up for myself and was like, yes, you know, like I did it. I'm generally not a negative person. I don't complain. If something bugs me, I usually, like many Canadians, just bottle it up and don't talk about it until I get home and I'm in bed with my husband and I'm just like, you know, this happened to me today and I can't believe it and I just wish I had have said this, this, and this, but I didn't because I'm always just too chicken. I'm just too chicken. I can't do it for some reason. Before I explain the story, if you like my videos or you're excited to watch this one, please support me, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. So the other day we were looking for flooring because we are in the middle of renovating our house. And we decided to support a local company here that sells paquet. And we went in, and because of Corona, of course, they have many restrictions. We called 2 times in advance to make sure it was okay. Because when you're spending thousands of euros on putting new flooring into a house, of course, I'm not going to just leave it up to my husband to make that decision. We both wanted to make that decision. And because of COVID, you know, my son is not always in daycare, so we had to bring him with us. And we went in the morning, so it was relatively empty in this very, very large store. And they, of course, have restrictions, so they're allowed a certain number of customers in a certain square meter parameter. And they were just super pissed off that we were taking up 3 spaces instead of 1 space. So this guy just went on and on and on about how we weren't supposed to bring 3 people and we should have thought about it beforehand and this is not okay and now we're taking up space for paying customers. Meanwhile, there's customers walking in with 2 people buying screws, like, you know, like a €5 box of screws, but no, I wasn't allowed to bring my son in. So anyway, long story short, this video has not been made to complain, but I stood up for myself and I was really proud of myself. And then I started thinking, what have I said, perhaps in English when I first got here, that I shouldn't perhaps said? And what have I learned over the course of living here over the last 7 years about how to speak or to communicate with Germans? So here it goes. The most obvious one is when speaking about World War II or the Holocaust, I like to tell people when they first come here, you know, if you can, just don't talk about it at all, because I don't think that it's going to help anyone if you bring up this subject. But what I really want to say is you're in Germany, so there is no room for joking about anything regarding World War II, Holocaust, or Hitler. And you might be thinking to yourself, especially as a German, who would joke about this, you know, like, I don't understand. Does this even exist? Well, in North America, if there's any North Americans watching, you definitely know that there are a certain number of jokes in North America about this. I don't joke about it. I'm not saying that anybody I know jokes about it, but I do know that jokes do exist, and these should not be brought with you to Germany. But then there's the more common ones that maybe you wouldn't actually necessarily think about if you haven't lived in Germany before. And number 1 would definitely be the topic of money. This is something that I find they keep very, very much private, whether that's telling them how much you pay in rent, how much you make in your job, or even Elterngeld, for example, which is the money from the government that you get when you're on maternity or paternity leave, or even, I don't know, like Kindergeld, so how much money you're getting per month from the government or from the Jugendamt to support your children. Anything regarding money, I would really be careful if I'm talking about it or if you're talking about it, because usually I'd say 99% of the time People here in Germany don't talk money unless it's within their immediate family or their very, very close friends. Calling someone by their first name is something that you have to be very, very careful with. Of course, we've got du and we've got sie here in Germany. And du and sie are basically a formal and informal way of addressing someone. So, of course, if you're going to be addressing them in the formal way of sie, which is perhaps to a colleague or to a superior, whether that's your boss or someone who is older than you or somebody who you really respect, who's not perhaps in your family or your circle of friends, you usually use the formal version of sie. This is similar in the fact that you wouldn't necessarily address someone with their first name, I'd say, unless you ask them ahead of time if that's okay. I also find that even in the workplace, sometimes people are like on a friend-to-friend basis and they're still saying like Frau Davis or something like that rather than saying, hey Jenna, can you come with me for a second? I have a question. One that I've always found funny is one that in Canada and I'd also say the USA we use a lot. And that is when you see someone and you're saying, hey there, how are you? You usually say, what's up or how are you doing or whatnot. And here in Germany, people don't say that unless they really are expecting an answer back. You could say, hallo, wie geht's dir? Wie geht es dir? But you're usually asking that because you really, really want to know how they are. Whereas in North America, we're like, oh, hey, what's up? Or hey, how are you? And then we just keep walking. It's not, you usually might even answer good, how are you? But if you don't have the time, you're just like, oh, hey, what's up? And you keep walking. Like you're not actually asking them a question, which now that I'm saying it out loud, does kind of seem really, really dumb. So I do like the way that they do it here in Germany. If you do want to ask them how they are, it's okay to ask them how they are, but expect a proper response back. And if you don't want a proper response back, then just say, hello. Another very common one for me coming from Canada is that we always say sorry. I wouldn't say a German would hate it if you said sorry, but I definitely keep it to a minimum because you're going to notice that not a lot of people say sorry in return. And when I first came here, I was almost offended sometimes if someone wouldn't say, oh, sorry, can you just move over a bit? Or, oh, sorry, can I just get past you for a second in the aisle, like when we're checking out at the grocery store or whatnot? And when they didn't say sorry, I was so offended. But it's just not in the culture here. People don't say sorry unless it's something that they really need to say sorry for. So if they're just moving past, they would just say, oh, can I just get past you for a second? It's not something that they would say, hey, I'm so sorry to bug you. Can you just scooch over a tiny bit? Yeah, thank you. When we're at a restaurant, and this is something that has happened time and time again when my family comes to visit from Canada, we really, really like using Amex or American Express. I'm sure in America they like using this too. But they often, or my family and my friends often come here, we're sitting at a restaurant and they'll be like at the end, oh, do you take Amex? And the German waiter or waitress will just look at them and be like, no. We've talked about tap water before, haven't we? This is like the biggest discussion or the biggest argument I have with Germans. And I know that in Germany, a lot of people think that it's dumb to give tap water for free. This is one thing that I found really hard to get used to when I moved to Germany. But I respect it and I understand it, and I don't usually ask for tap water for free. I do know that legally they have to be able to offer you tap water for free in Germany, but you don't always get the response perhaps you were hoping for. So if you want to ask for tap water, then be ready for a somewhat snarky response sometimes, because not all restaurants are going to want to offer this to you. And many Germans will say, don't order the tap water because you're not supporting your local business, because this is where the Germans make the most of their money, in the restaurant business, which is true. And when we're talking about time, you might have also heard that Germans tend to be very, very much on time. They are not usually late for a meeting or a get-together or what have you. And they usually do like that you are not only punctual, but that you create or you plan an appointment before just popping by. So what we like to do in North America sometimes is say, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll pop by next week and I'll pick that up, or I'll pop by next week and we can go to the park, or whatever it be. It's just I'll pop by, you know, I'll just swing by, or I'll come on over, or I'll just ring your doorbell when I'm in a neighborhood. That is not something that you do here in Germany. I've honestly entirely forgotten about that now because I'm so used to this like strict, you know, I pull out my calendar and I write in all of my appointments and whatnot, because scheduling is very important here in Germany. A few more tips for you. I wouldn't say happy birthday, or I wouldn't wish someone happy birthday before it's their actual birthday. A lot of the time they tend to consider this to be unlucky. I would also perhaps be careful when mentioning different football clubs when you're in a specific city, because rivalries here do get rather heated up. I have never seen rivalries like I have for sports as I do in Germany. Like, these people will fight to the death, especially before or after a game. So much so that they usually tend to ban drinking or consuming alcohol in the stadium if you are the away team. Also, always make sure if you're going to cheer someone and say cheers or zum Wohl or Prost, always make sure to look them in the eye, because again, this is just something that we do here in Germany. And I would also just make sure that wherever you are, you do your research beforehand to see if there are any rivalries in addition to the sporting world that you might need to watch out for. For example, a good local one here would be, you do not talk about how much you love Kölsch beer, which is a local beer over in Cologne or Köln. You would talk about how much you love Altbier. And you never mix that one up, because, I mean, nobody's gonna come and punch you in the face, but you know, rivalries can be real for many, many people here in Germany. I know not for a lot of the youngsters here, but there is a lot of good old tradition here in Germany, and you definitely need to make sure that you watch what you say to a German. So this was a fun video for me today that made me reminisce about when I first got here and the things that I learned not to say, or perhaps things that I learned that I should practice saying more often, or addressing people more formally, for example. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, und wie immer, vielen, vielen lieben Dank und bis später.